Holodeck 3 program is reinstated.
Open sesame!
Commander Klingon vessel. We are energizing transporter beam. Now.
One, engage!
All right, hello, welcome everyone to the Holodeck, Star Trek from the Holodeck, the Discovery Edition. I am the captain of the USS Rainman Digital, and at the science station today, wearing a red skirt and black knee-high boots.
Federation regulation, Mike.
I am sexualizing my co-host right now, and I don't give a shit. Is Officer David.
It's all Federation regulation.
Thank you. Can we have you wear what's that thing they made 7 of 9 wear at Voyager? So that her waist is like super, super tiny.
I don't know if you want to see that camel toe, though.
Oh, yours, you mean? No. Holy shit. If you had camel toe, something would be wrong with you, Dave.
Wrong. Well, I am Asian, so you never know.
Oh my God. Can we start over? Can we go back in time? Please, Discovery. Let's remove David's last comment from the cosmic equation. Is that what Saru said? All right, so it's here finally, at last, the third season of Star Trek Discovery. We are about 2 months shy. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Dave. 2 months shy from it being 2 years since the season 2 premiere.
That is amazing.
So we've been waiting a long time
Yeah.
for this season. And of course, we know why. They had pushed the release date originally so they can squeeze in Star Trek Picard. But then also the coronavirus happened, which created, I'm sure, some post-production issues. And then we ended up moving it to the end of the year. I don't think that was the original plan.
No.
Although it has worked pretty nice because then we had Lower Decks leading into Star Trek Discovery. So we had a whole lot of Star Trek excitement leading up to the season 3 premiere. So I'm very happy. And if you even look at what we had before Picard, we had short treks, Picard. We had about a 2-month break. Lower Decks, Star Trek Discovery. It's been a fucking amazing year for Star Trek.
Absolutely. This is the most Star Trek we've seen in ages, and it looks like they're not going to be stopping anytime soon.
No. I don't think so. I mean, we have Stranger Things premiering eventually.
Strange New Worlds.
Strange New Worlds. What's Strange New Things? What's that? I don't even know what that is. I made that up. It's a new series produced by Shayban. It's a generic ripoff of Star Trek. All right, so I do feel like the wait is going to be well worth it, especially if you look at what they gave us in this pilot, in the season 3 premiere. We are in completely uncharted areas, and I found myself completely intrigued by the setting. The Federation utopia that had been introduced in the days of the original series and explored more thoroughly within the prequel series Enterprise, and the riveting golden age of the TNG era that then sowed seeds of a fledgling government that was watered in DS9, and of course the darker vision of Picard, which is due to the aftermath of the events of DS9, the 2002 TNG film Nemesis, and the event that kicked off the 2009 Kelvin timeline flick. All roads, David, have been leading to this fucking point.
Yeah, to this moment.
When the utopia, spearheaded by humankind, would be challenged.
Not just challenged, but nearly, you get the sense in the very first episode that it got destroyed. Like every great empire, it crumbled. And it got reduced it's basically on a life support right now.
And I love it, Dave. And I know I'd even go to social media after watching the episode because I don't give a fuck. I don't care what any of the trolls are saying because all of this makes sense. That's why I purposely opened up the show with that entire little history there. All roads have led here. It makes perfect sense. Will the values of the Federation and Starfleet crack under the pressure of universal changes, or will the hope and the belief in the system be strong enough to keep it together until a solution can be found? That's really the question that this episode posed, Dave.
Yes. And that's the thing. It's like, I think a lot of the trolls out there get this. It's a huge misconception. I believe that they all feel this way, that what Discovery is saying is like the Federation is bad. No, it's not saying the Federation was bad or if the Federation is evil. The Federation was weakened at that point. Just like
by outside influences.
Outside influences. Yeah. How can anything survive an onslaught that the Federation has put up with over like what, 100, maybe a couple, probably or 1,000 years? You're going to see chips inside of an empire.
And something that was made clear is that the utopia is gone, but not lost. And it has temporarily been replaced by a more gritty dystopian future. But the point is that there's still hope. That was the entire point of the ending of the episode.
Yeah.
That humankind hasn't changed. It's just outside influences that has affected the course of the Federation and Starfleet. And as long as there's hope, and that's why I love that moment when Burnham said, the Federation is more than just ships.
Exactly. That's my favorite point of the episode, too.
Dude, it was powerful, and I got a big old nerd Star Trek smile on my face, because I'm like, thank you, Michelle Paradise, for making that the very first fucking thing.
And not just Michelle Paradise, Sonequa Martin in this episode.
Yeah.
This is probably her greatest moment I've ever seen.
Oh, man, I agree with you.
When she basically makes that comment, she makes the argument that basically the Federation is more than just, like what she said, ships. It's more than just the tech. It's just more than just what we as fans gravitate towards. Being Federation is hearkening back to what Gene Roddenberry said. It's the ideals of a perfect society.
Yeah.
That's what I think has been forgotten by the fan base for years. Not just years, decades, I think, because a lot of Star Trek babies out there have forgotten that basically it's more than just wearing a certain uniform, using a certain tech. Being Federation is about having ideals.
I'm going to put my phaser to full effect and kill you for saying that, David. How dare you?
I'm going to write on my blog, how dare you?
I'm going to go to my blog, IHateShayman.com.
Well, wait a minute. I
go to that website quite often. I really, really enjoyed the opening episode for season 3. This show, Dave, whether people want to accept it or not, is the flagship. It is now the flagship of the Trek universe.
Oh, absolutely.
And
it has to be.
It has to be. And it is finally a true sequel series because it can connect everything together under a single thematic umbrella, but also narratively as well. Look at the very first thing they tackled in this episode, the temporal wars.
Yes.
This was a big element within Star Trek Enterprise, and maybe we'll plan a few episodes where we can get into that at a later time so that people can possibly get some information on that. But the reason why I loved it is not only is it a direct connection to other shows, but it also removes the time travel element off the board. And I thank the Star Trek guys. Thank you for just simply saying, oh, time travel tech has been banned.
Yep.
Good.
And that's what I was really hoping for and I'm hoping for the season going forward is it's not about changing what we found out in this particular episode because I don't want to go into spoiler territory.
Mm-hmm.
What Burnham finds out, what happens to the Federation, it's not about them going back and fixing it. It's about reestablishing it right here, right now.
And that's why I'm glad they said, hey, let's remove that little plot device of time travel so that you can't get the any thoughts going that, hey, we're going to go back in time and stop the great burn from happening.
Don't you dare try to save the whales.
Oh, David, you don't want to see them travel around the sun?
No. I don't want to see Burnham try to travel around the sun.
Come on, Dave. And everything they set up thematically as well, I hope Picard, not just thematically, narratively as well, I hope Picard works in tandem with this idea. And Shaban and Akiva Goldsman, I hope they're not allowed to just ignore things that they don't want to deal with. Because in order for Discovery to really resonate as the true sequel series and the flagship of the franchise, you can't have another show undercutting it.
Yeah.
With opposing themes, opposing storylines that may call into question the events of this now future series. So we got to be careful.
We got to be careful. But that first scene, dude, just got me so jazzed up because it was an establishment of the different timeline, right? Was showing that different tech, that just the clock with the clock with the, I would guess, is an actual bird, and that's an alarm clock, and the whole desk just showing up out of sand.
Dave, I forgot how. I think we talked about this recently. How beautiful Discovery is.
Yeah.
That opening teaser is fucking amazing.
It's amazing.
It's gorgeously shot. I mean, the aesthetic gives off this idea of oneness, loneliness, the fact that he's one man.
Yeah.
It's so smart.
And then on top of that, it helps establish the tech aspect of Star Trek in that timeline.
The advances, yeah.
The advances.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been constantly hearkening, wanting to see Star Trek do, because one of the biggest things about Star Trek is taking those risks and showing technological advancements that we can only dream of.
But also, when you're dealing with 1,000 years in the future, you might even think, well, wouldn't technology be even more advanced? But the idea that the world has been cut off,
been de-evolved,
that would actually stifle advancement to some degree.
Exactly.
So this 1,000 years in the future idea, not being as advanced as you may think, actually really works as well. So they're doing, I'm not going to be negative. I'm not going to bring it up, but they're doing things that other shows don't do. Like, meaning they already set the table for reasons why things aren't going to work or why certain things do make sense.
100% agree with you.
It's so smart, David.
This was actually...
I'm going to go find Michelle Paradise and make out with her. I'm like, come here.
I want to worship her.
I will wash your feet with my beard and long hair. Come here.
Whatever you want.
I will do what Mary Magdalene did for Jesus. I don't know.
Wow.
I didn't know where that came from. But anyways, all right, so live read. Get more Star Trek from the Holodeck every month by subscribing to our Patreon page. There are 2 specific tiers that we now offer for the Holodeck listeners, and I know they would love them. The $3 tier, the behind-the-scenes discussions, bonus shows, and pre-shows. That's right, every time we sit down to record or go live, we do a pre-show. It can range anywhere between 5 to 25 minutes. And if it goes over, it's now considered a bonus show. So for $3 a month, you can subscribe to that. And also the $5 tier option, which is our podcast tier. It gives you everything from the $3 tier, but also an additional 2 full podcasts a month pertaining to Star Trek. Different topics we get into each and every month. So if you want to help us stay on the air, please head over to patreon.com/RainmanDigital and pledge. You can also do annual subscriptions as well, and when you do, you will receive 2 months free. So for a full year, you can spend either $30 for the behind-the-scenes tier or $50 for the podcast tier. It helps you, and it helps us. Patreon.com/RainmanDigital. All right, so let's get into this episode, Dave, officially. You ready?
Ready.
All right, so the episode was directed by Olatunde Asunami, written by Michelle Paradise, Jenny Lumet, and Alex Kurtzman. The synopsis: arriving 930 years in the future, Burnham navigates a galaxy she no longer recognizes while searching for the rest of the USS Discovery crew. Insert all the babies out there crying that it is just a Burnham show again. Just a Burnham show. But I felt like that was the smartest way to handle this. If you had Burnham along with the new character Booker or Book, and you had all the new elements of the future, and you had the new settings that you had to set up and explain to people, and then you also had the Discovery crew, it would have been a very busy episode, and you would have run the risk of just completely dismantling the tidiness of this episode. Because surprisingly, despite the fact that this episode was very fast-paced and there was a lot to set up, it was actually very tidy.
It was very tidy, and it was very intelligently written coming off of season 2. Right? I like the fact that basically what they did was they kicked off everything the moment season 2 ended.
Yeah.
When she goes through the wormhole.
Yeah.
That made perfect sense to me, and it made the transition for me as a fan from season 2 coming into season 3 much more comfortable and understandable. You know, I would have been really upset if they just basically suddenly we get dropped in, and suddenly Burnham's been in the future for this long, and
right.
a lot of like the stills people were actually talking about was, oh, Burnham's been in the future for a while and has been looking for her crew.
Which we get the idea that's what the second episode will do.
Probably.
So the first episode gets us kind of in there right away. Second episode, time has passed, possibly, if you look at some of the previews. So yeah.
Yeah.
But I do have to say that the intrigue of the unknown is back. Folks have been wanting the exploration side of Trek to return for years. And here we go. Being essentially flung into a future that none of us recognize, there's now a sense of wonderment again that just hasn't been there in years.
Oh, yeah.
Which was shared not just through the narrative, but also through the eyes of Burnham. Her inexhaustible. I give up, David. Inexhaustible. Oh, my God. Exhaustible?
Exhaustible.
Inexhaustible. There we go. Jesus, Dave, this is all your fault. Her inexhaustible curiosity, even while being chased, shot, punched, almost even killed, she can't stop being enamored by the things she sees. I liked it because it's so in line with the Star Trek spirit, the idea of the curious explorer. And even though she finds herself in this, going down the rabbit hole, this Alice in Wonderland, where everything's new, I loved how they found ways to explain new ideas to us in a very quick fashion and use Burnham's own curiosity to do it.
Yes. And like this was a different type of unknown wonderment than season 2, I felt, because season 2 started with this feeling of wonderment, of this mystery of what's going on, the mystery of the Red Angel. I like this establishment of wonderment far more than the beginning of the season 2, because it speaks to the core tenets of Star Trek.
Right.
That need to know about not just the unknown, but the future. What lies ahead of us?
Dave, there's just so many questions, and it's not designed. Yes, there is the mystery element. We had the burn, which was essentially a bit of a plot device for now, but understandably so. I mean, how many ideas are you going to introduce and explain in one episode? You can't. That would be shitty. So I understand why they simply introduced it the way they did for this episode. But there's just so much that they set up in the way of. It's different in the sense, in Discovery, the previous seasons, which I did enjoy. It's more of a mystery, right? It's set up in a very investigative type way. Whereas this episode is very different, but also stays true to how Discovery is more of a mystery. But they set it up as a way, hey, listen, everything you used to know, it's slightly different. It's, remember the Gorns? There's one. Remember the Andorians? There's a few. There's the Orions. There's a few, but it's not quite right. So there's this, as a Star Trek fan, you are just flung into this aura of just sheer curiosity. Like, oh, how is this going to work? How is this going to work? And it just brings this element of intrigue that, honestly, Dave, I don't think I've had this level of intrigue for Star Trek in a very, very long time. Because even in Discovery Season 1 and Season 2, sure, there weren't things we weren't sure about, right? Story elements and how they would explain certain things, but we knew about Klingons. We knew about certain threats. We understood Section 31. We're now in a territory where the ideas are completely new, and they can really go in any direction. And Go ahead, Dave.
And that's the thing, is kind of like, it was weird for me because I'm like going, Discovery has to keep similar tones, right? When it comes to its series. The tone that has been carried from season 1 to season 2 is that tone of mystery, of just like what you alluded. I think that's the best way to put it, is the investigative feeling.
Right.
Like you're trying to figure out a puzzle.
Which is very different than any Star Trek that we've ever had. None of them were, mysteries.
And now we get to this, and I was really curious to see how are they going to continue the tone that's been established that Discovery has to carry. That feeling of a mystery, it's a puzzle we have to solve.
Yeah.
And here, the way that they put out the two mysteries that I think is going to be kind of like the narrative arc that we're going to be seeing is the burn, and how are they going to get the Federation back together?
Right. Yeah.
And the way they portrayed it was, I don't know, more positive. Like in the past 2 seasons, you get this dark feeling of, oh my God, can they do this? Mm-hmm. While here, it has that, like that...
a true sense of hope.
That true sense of hope.
Yeah.
The true sense of hope, and you feel that, the Federation's going to come out in the end. It's okay.
It's an element that many of the old school Star Trek fans have been complaining about that's been missing. Where's the sense of optimism? Where's the hope?
Yeah.
And yes, I feel like the previous 2 seasons have had that sprinkled throughout, but the fact that this season right here seems to be built on a singular thought, which is hope, and piecing the Federation back together and making sure it survives, I think that's a great way to start this season of Star Trek and really recontextualize the direction that the Star Trek universe under Kurtzman has moved. Mm-hmm. I mean, much of this episode was designed to get the narrative moving, and it did move fast. It was concise, but it didn't waste time. So we were delving into a lot of these things in a very concise fashion. The humor also brought a much-needed balance to the darker tones that were definitely there, which, by the way, some of the moments of levity felt like a page taken from the classic Trek films. There was this swashbuckling, I wink in the face of danger vibe that felt so reminiscent of the older days of Trek. Something that, almost a scenario that you would find Kirk in.
Yeah.
And
right
we haven't
bat,
had that level of levity, that type of levity in Discovery yet.
Not yet. And the one thing that was like a pure example of that was when Burnham gets sprayed in the face.
Oh, so good.
And I don't mean that in a bad way.
Oh.
But like when she gets...
David, it's never a bad way, Dave.
When she starts hallucinating and falling under the influence of the drug,
yeah,
that was kind of very Trek-like. That's a Trek humor moment.
Dude, it wasn't just, hey, let's force humor. It was actually a page taken from the Star Trek films, the movie. That's a scene that you would expect to see in one of the Star Trek movies.
That's like that's very reminiscent of like the moments in the films, like Scotty. When Scotty bangs his head on the hull of the ship, saying that, oh, I know the ship from the back of my hand,
yeah.
Bang, and then falls down.
Yeah,
that's that type of humor, and it works.
Yeah,
I
agree.
Absolutely works.
I agree. So what do we know so far with this first episode? Let's go through these one by one.
God, there's so much.
The Federation exists, but they are cut off from each other due to something called the burn, which we'll get into in a second. There's some theories going on already, or going around the interwebs already about this element. We know, according to co-showrunner Alex Kurtzman, that the Federation has remained strong up until 3188 when something cataclysmic happened. The Gorn destroyed 2 light years of subspace. Tritanium is almost not seen, which, if people don't know what that is, that's a major material. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's the major material needed to make starships.
Yeah, tritanium. It's just as important as dilithium.
Yeah, so if there's no dilithium, there's no tritanium. I mean, it would make no way to communicate within subspace. It's no wonder that the world is cut off. The universe. Number one, I love the social messages. There's an obvious push into environmentalism.
Very
this
much
is
so
this
in
is
this
how
episode.
you explore liberal thought in Star Trek. Thank you. When our new character Book, why am I calling him Booker? When our
I think
new
it flows
character,
better.
it does. When our new character Book mentioned there being no natural wormholes, and he said, "I thought people would learn their lesson about tearing holes through space." The idea of possibly overmining. It was said that in an instant, all dilithium exploded. Whatever the reason behind it, I have a feeling that much of it will have something to do with irreversible damage brought on by exploiting resources. That's what a lot of these elements seem to be leading us down, that path. Look at our new character Book. He's got some connection to nature,
Yep.
an activist. He's out saving the lives of endangered animals. His family were killers and poachers. Everyone in his family were, apparently, but every once in a while, one of him or someone like him shows up within the gene pool, hinting at the idea of balance. In fact, I believe he said that word. Then you look at what Discovery is doing and how they have showed up, which is almost a metaphor for Discovery's appearance, the balance that will possibly set things right within the universe.
And the thing I liked about the introduction of Book was like that whole concept was not shoved in your face.
No.
His introduction was smoothly done to the point that when you get to the end and you realize what type of character he is, it doesn't bother me because it's not shoved in my face that he's an environmentalist. Do not kill animals around him. And,
Well, it's
poachers are bad.
Well, it's also not a very controversial thought either. It's
Yeah.
just something, hey, listen, what do we talk about in our world with problems? Over-mining, fracking, which, listen, I'm not necessarily against fracking. I'm not going to get into political talk about that type of stuff. But there are warnings pertaining to this type of behavior and the irreparable damage that it can do to our Earth. So when you say statements like, I thought you would learn about tearing holes through space, and then you have the concept that all the dilithium instantly exploded
just randomly.
You start looking at this message, this very, I don't want to say liberal message, I want to say a human message pertaining to the environment. This is what Star Trek has always done.
Yeah.
So to see them slip that in a very subtle way, because you do have to look for it. It's not in your face.
Yeah.
I feel like I personally think it feels very sincere to Star Trek.
And I think the only person that could possibly do something like that is Michelle Paradise, because you got to remember, me and you have talked about Michelle Paradise in the past.
Well, it's the element that's been missing from Discovery, is that the subtleties of social statements.
Social statements.
Yeah.
And if for our audience out there, if you look up Michelle Paradise, her work in some of the Star Trek before she ever took on Discovery, like the comics and like some of the books that she's written, she is a very intelligent writer, and she knows how to make that type of writing more palatable for an audience. And that's what I felt like in this episode, was like, I feel really comfortable in this episode, and I like where the writing is going because you're not standing on a soapbox.
Yeah.
Like in the past with a lot, even like with Discovery in the past, sometimes in the past when they get a little heavy-handed with their statements.
I don't think Michelle Paradise wrote comic books, did she?
I believe so. I think she did. She did one or two, and then, but her type of writing, dude, I forgot, and then I remembered at the end of this episode. I'm like going, why do I feel so good about this episode? Oh, wait a minute, it's written by Michelle Paradise. Oh yeah, I have nothing to fear.
Yeah. So we'll see, man. So far so good, right?
Yeah.
All right. So pertaining to the theories surrounding the element called the burn, according to TrekMovie.com, they have posted a theory that connects the burn to Star Trek Voyager. And I love when I know I'm a Star Trek nerd, because when I heard the burn, I thought of this episode. So
You do?
So when I searched it, I was like, I can't be the only Star Trek fan that thought about this. When they talked about ripping through subspace, because I had recently finished my Star Trek Voyager rewatch, this episode was pretty much fresh on my mind. So I Googled it, and sure enough, TrekMovie.com had an entire article about it. So I'm going to go through this. I'm going to go through the basics here. So far, this is all we know about the burn. It was the day the galaxy took a hard left. Okay, so the answer can be found in Omega answers the question is the headline for this paragraph. One of our first clues leading to Voyager comes from the moment in the trailer when Saru encounters a Cordionite on the planet where the USS Discovery crash landed, and the alien says to Saru, I always believed you were out there somewhere and that we were part of the Federation no matter what. This, along with the appearance of several other familiar aliens in the trailer, shows that the burn didn't seem to kill off life in the Federation, but it appears to have cut off communication and travel, leaving planets isolated. If you're looking for something that could stop travel and communication, you need to look no further than the Omega molecule. This was a huge, huge game changer in Voyager because the idea introduced the thought that you can even ignore the Prime Directive. I remember when this episode premiered, and it was one of those moments where you're like, shit, what the hell would ever make the Federation throw out their precious Prime Directive? Well, it is the Omega Directive. Star Trek Voyager, during the 4th season episode, the Omega Directive, it introduced the Omega molecule into Trek canon. According to Captain Janeway, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Captain Janeway synthesized Omega is the powerful substance known to exist, derived from extremely rare boronite. A single Omega molecule has the same energy as a warp core. It was first discovered by the Federation in the 23rd century in the search for an inexhaustible power source. However, there was an accident and a single particle of Omega destroyed a Starfleet science station and destabilized an entire region. It turns out there's no way to stabilize the Omega molecule. Any attempt to create them resulted in disaster. The first try by the Federation created ruptures in subspace, affecting an entire sector. The incident was classified, and the Federation implemented the Omega Directive, known solely to captains and flag officers. No one else knew about this.
Yes.
After any detection of Omega, orders were to destroy it at all costs, even if this required violating the Prime Directive. Omega was so dangerous that the Federation was willing to violate its most core principle to destroy it.
Yep. And the coolest thing about that episode I remember was the fact that it was posed to Janeway, if they use the Omega molecule, they can get home.
Right.
And that was the whole thing that challenged the Prime Directive, because like for Janeway in that episode, it's kind of like at this point, she has been on this road trying to get her people home. And suddenly she's given the Omega molecule right there, the boronite. And then she has to battle with the fact, I can either use this to get us home, but I will destroy a sector in space. Dude, now it was one of my favorite episodes.
This is also where 7 of 9, wasn't she obsessed with it because it was a perfect element?
It was the perfect element.
Yeah.
And like for Janeway, that was the whole, during that whole episode was the battle of Janeway's morals.
Yeah.
And I loved it because it really begged the question of the Prime Directive. What's more important, the Prime Directive or the safety of your people? That's what it was.
Yeah. So I like that this element could play a factor.
I could see it.
It does make sense.
It's a good theory.
And imagine if they actually use this. It would make, it would bring a level of consistency to the world of Star Trek that...
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's why I said, Dave, this is the opportunity for Star Trek Discovery to be a true sequel series, because they're in a territory now where they can truly connect every single Star Trek series that has ever been released, movie, future movie if it takes place in the past, future TV series. This is the series that can now connect all of it.
Yeah, and actually show the ramifications of all those important decisions that we've seen our favorite characters make.
Yep.
You know, down to possibly even Kirk and Spock. You know, all the decisions that even Jean-Luc Picard and Data made, all those decisions mean something. And I didn't know about this theory till you brought it up. I like it. I think it ties really nicely if they were to do it and you find out that Janeway's decision was the one that caused the destruction of...
Oh, Jesus. I wasn't going
Yes.
to go that route. You think it's her decision?
I think it's hers because remember the whole
But she
point
didn't
of,
use it, though.
but she found it. That was the thing. She found it and she recorded it
Yeah.
and she kept record of it.
Okay,
That's that was that at the end of the day, that was, I remember that episode vividly, that was the decision that basically a lot of people were like going, you shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
That data should be destroyed. But Janeway decided, no, I'm not going to
I
destroy
thought it
that.
was destroyed at the end.
No, because remember, Seven of Nine wanted to badly keep it because it was
Yeah, and
kind
it
of
was-
like a trump card.
And I thought it was destroyed, though. Huh.
At
I
the
don't
very
remember.
end, that was the question. Do you destroy the knowledge and just move on and that knowledge is lost forever, or you keep that knowledge? And in the end, I remember that basically they ended up keeping it, but they never used it.
All right, so the Omega wasn't just that it was a sufficient quantity. Hold on. The danger of Omega wasn't just that a sufficient quantity could, according to Janeway, wipe out half a quadrant. The Federation was even more concerned about the larger effect on subspace.
Subspace.
As explained in Voyager, disruptions in subspace kept ships from being able to go to warp in the sector around the failed 23rd century test with Omega, even into the 24th century. And warp travel is fundamental to the Federation. Potential member species don't even merit first contact until they independently develop warp technology.
Yep.
So this would actually make perfect sense. If they don't use this, it would seem very strange.
It'd be very strange, but it depends on what they use it instead of this. I think that this would be a very cool theory to use.
Okay, so as for what caused it or who, the burn, according to TrekMovie.com, the most obvious suspect is the Borg. The Voyager episode revealed that the Borg were obsessed with the perfection they saw in Omega.
Yep.
They learned about Omega even before the Federation and assimilated a dozen species with myths about it, including the one that described a powerful substance that could burn the sky. Yeah, this makes sense.
It makes so much sense. And I think that I'm like you. I think it'd be a missed opportunity, but I'm going to keep my rational helmet on and say, depending on what they use instead of this, that's what I'm going to judge on it.
Yeah.
What else are you going to give me? This is the most viable theory that they could possibly use. And, dude, they could have so much fun with this theory.
Yep. All right, Dave, we need to go to a very quick break, and then when we get back, we'll jump into the rest of our discussion. We'll be right back. Star Trek from the Holodeck every single month by heading over to our Patreon page, patreon.com/RaymanDigital. Get more Star Trek from the Holodeck every single month. And keep us on the air. It helps us stay on the air so we can continue to entertain you. Patreon.com/RaymanDigital pledge.
Hey, dude, did you see this? CBS reportedly considering Star Trek Deep Space Nine revival.
Well, we all know the news now.
We don't do the news now. I didn't realize.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to Star Trek from the Holodeck. David was very giddy, so if he started talking, if you
Just
hear
gave
him,
away something.
it's all right. We're very unprofessional on this network.
Oh, that's true.
All right, so there's a lot here in this episode. It's very exciting because there's so much they can do. Even taking the idea of the Prime Directive, and imagine this, Dave, taking the idea of the Prime Directive and using it to pose a question on your very own existence. What happens when you are at the other end of the Prime Directive? That's essentially where the Federation is at. I mean, how many episodes of Star Trek have we seen throughout the last 50 years where they say, should we let a species just go extinct? Survival of the fittest? Should we interfere? I mean, who's to say this isn't where the human species should end? Or the Federation, for that matter, I should say.
Yep.
So if they were to pose those types of philosophical thoughts, I feel like it would even be that much more fitting. In fact, without them even stating that, that's essentially what they're doing.
That's what they're doing. And that's what I mean is like the way that everything's been subtly written to, in this episode is so nicely knit and done. It shows that Michelle Paradise understands Star Trek and the tones, just the core root concepts.
Imagine, Dave, if they pose the question, has the Federation run its course? And is it time to evolve beyond? I'm not saying that's what I want.
Yeah.
That's not what I want, but it would make sense for these types of questions to be posed. And perhaps at the end of that question, the answer is no, it should not be the end, and this is why.
Yeah.
And they move forward and explain the whys in subsequent episodes. Now, even though I love this episode and it was an amazing start, I would suggest caution. And that's the Star Trek nerd in me. If the Federation has fallen to some degree, the legacy must still matter. And this is a very delicate aspect that has been woven into Trek forever. The legacy. Everything that has transpired must always matter. The sacrifices of the TOS crew, the sacrifices of the TNG era, including Deep Space Nine, Voyager. The Federation stumbled, fine, but let's not mar the path of what came before. Let's strengthen it. And the more we learn, it doesn't seem like the Federation necessarily stumbled. It doesn't seem like it was their fault. There was something that was out of their hands that happened that interfered within the progress of the Federation, which I'm more inclined to like that idea a little bit better rather than seeing the Federation fall. Yes, the path has been laid out, as we said, with it kind of heading in this direction for years, even starting with Berman's run of Star Trek. But I don't think any of us ever wanted the Federation to fall or for them to fall because of their own doing. But if they were weakened to the point where they were then defeated or at least marginalized because of something that was out of their hands, that would also work with that entire idea.
Well, and that's why I like the concept of a great calamity like the burn, destroying all transport and all communication, because that is a very honest way of a organization, a government like the Federation, dwindling in numbers. Because if you can't, if the Federation cannot move from sector to sector like they could, their numbers would be scattered.
You're dealing with a culture that's now isolated.
Yeah, and that's why I also like the fact that, in a way, the Federation almost became kind of like a religion, because it's like what Book said is like, oh, you're a true believer.
Yeah, and we got to be careful about that too, though, Dave, because do we really want the idea that these are radicalized individuals?
I wouldn't say that they're radicalized. I just basically think that they believe
True believers in hope?
In hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, like
I can see
the
that.
core concepts of the Federation from this episode, it seems like they're really great ideals to live by, like hope. And like for like a cynic like Book, I can understand why, he would, when he calls Burnham a true believer, there's a little cynicism in it, because you look at Book and you see what he's lived through. Something like the Federation seems like a dream.
Yeah.
And I can understand them actually seeing the Federation as kind of like this dwindling kind of religious type of true believing type of thing.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that aspect as long as it doesn't look like they're radicals, but
No,
if they're
no.
true believers in the idea of hope and
The idea of hope.
the ideology of the Federation, then that works. And that goes in line with the securing of the legacy, that everything that came before matters. And it does seem like that's what they are doing, especially when you take a look at the ending, as you brought up, when Berman met with the ancestor of
God, dude, that was so awesome.
one of the last few Starfleet officers and Federation representatives. I mean, that was a very powerful moment.
That hit me in the feels.
Honestly, Dave, I think that's one of the most powerful moments in all of Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah.
I mean,
I agree.
it symbolizes and embodies the very core principles of Trek, even though there was no words necessarily exchanged when they were raising that flag, but everything that came before, the conversation between him and Burnham, how they don't know each other. The two of them are literally separated by over almost 1,000 years of history.
Yeah.
And yet the moment they meet each other, they can find common ground in the basic core principles of Starfleet and the Federation.
And hope. A basic concept of hope.
The idea of hope. That's a strong statement. And if people out there are complaining about that, to me, that moment is Star Trek.
Yes.
100%.
100%. It is Star Trek. I mean, and anybody who, I'll come out and say it, anybody who looks at that and basically kind of rolls their eyes, you're like, Book, I get it. You're a cynic. You are a cynic.
Oh, look at you.
But it's okay. You know, stuff like believing in the Federation, like, you know, that guy basically saying, hey, I've lived for this long. Would you do me the honor of actually,
good.
putting up the flag, because no one else, only a regulated officer can do this, and I'm not a regulated officer. And Burnham basically looking at it and says, you are more of a regulated officer than anybody worthy. There is no such thing as you're not worthy because you're not a regulated officer.
Yeah.
That was, for me, that was Sonequa Martin's greatest dramatic character moment.
Yeah.
Because it set the tone for, like, honestly, this makes Burnham look fantastic.
Yeah, I like her a lot in this episode.
I liked her for the first time.
Oh, for the first time, David. I've always liked her, but she wasn't my favorite character.
Yeah, she wasn't my favorite
yeah.
character up to this point.
I think she was really on point. This entire episode, she was fucking great.
She was fantastic in this episode. And then you get to this point, it's like, all right, you know that whole fear of all of us saying that, oh, it's all going to be a Burnham show. It's going to be a Burnham show. We're going to have to follow Burnham. I'm willing to follow Burnham because
I've never understood that argument, though, but not to get off subject there. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, it is a subject that we can go probably close to hours on.
You could say TNG was the Picard and Data show. You could say Voyager was the 7 of 9 show. I mean, come on. Every Star Trek has their go-tos.
Yeah. And honestly, this moment made This Is Burnham's show. This is Burnham's.
Yeah.
Because we all, if you're a Star Trek fan, you believe the same things that Burnham believes, and you want the Federation to come back.
Yeah, especially Burnham is hot this season. I don't know what it is, but she's kind of attractive. She's always been attractive, but she's kind of steamy in this episode.
Oh, so the stills later with her with the dreadlocks?
Oh yeah.
God.
Yeah, get after it, Book.
You know he's going to.
Oh, that's why he took his shirt off. He's ominous.
I'm going to show this.
This is how we do it in the future. All right, so some tech stuff. Portable transporters. Now, the idea is cool, but let's not forget to explain new tech and sciences. Now, this is my only nitpick.
Okay.
Discovery, I feel, so far has done a good job doing what Picard did a terrible job at doing, where they do explain the science behind things. Look at the mycelial network. I mean, that was so explained and based on real science and just fantastic. I've never had that problem with Discovery. There's always that technobabble, right?
Yes.
And they, even if it may be made up technobabble, there's an explanation and a reason why certain things work. And that's always been a part of Star Trek, always. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Picard, you have a gadget that works just if you use your mind because you're Peter Pan and the Lost Boys.
Mike, don't go there. Don't go there.
I'm just saying that I don't want that to become a thing with Discovery because this is going to be a really Star Trek nerd complaint. But we already know the intricacies of a transporter.
Yes.
And how they operate, how they work, and reasons why they don't work. And a portable transporter doesn't make sense. If you understand, and this sounds so nerdy, if you understand the science behind Trek. Now, behind the transporter, the fake science behind the transporter.
The fake science.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave. Has there ever been a portable transporter before?
Yes, there have. But the thing was, the technology was banned. It was experimental when it was used in, I think Voyager. And
I don't remember, but I would like them to explain it and how it works.
Yeah, I would like them to explain it also because that's the Trek nerd in me. But the thing I liked about it was that it's not a precedent. It's not brand new. It's not a crazy idea to think that they could come out with individual transporters or portable transporters.
Okay, so
we have seen it.
A portable or mobile transporter was a portable or temporary place transporter pad that provides site-to-site transportation. Let's see. Unlike site-to-site transporters, these devices were large and bulky units.
Yes, but they were portable. So it's kind of like, for me, at first it bothered me.
But there's a place where your body is stored. The dematerialized substances that makes up your body is stored. Where is it being stored on a portable device?
That's the only nitpick that I have to say is like, where the hell do you keep it?
Does the portable transporter have to have like a main hub within the planet where everything is stored? How do you pick your site to transport? Like, that's the other thing. Like, how is he knowing where he's going to transport to? Because transportation used to take calculations.
Yes.
That was the cool part about transporters, is that you had to calculate. There was a science behind how you transported people.
Now, unless they explain, and the way that the way I explained it to myself is like, well, could they come up with the technology and make it small enough to keep on yourself? It's obvious that Book actually has a portable kind of hollow device on him that he keeps on his wrist that allows him to control his ship, that he can use to control a ship. Mm-hmm. We see that everybody else does too. And we also do see that basically when he goes through those scans, there's stuff that's basically implanted in him that allows him to walk past alarms and stuff like that for registration. So I started thinking to myself, well, they could have made technology that could have been implanted into a humanoid body where it's just normal. It's a reach. It's honestly a reach.
Yeah.
But when you think about it in today's world, everything else is starting to go that way where we have smaller and smaller devices. There was a time when, I hate to bring this up because it was a failed thing, Google Glass. When we all thought Google Glass was the latest technology that was going to come up.
It's not?
Yeah, that wasn't going to work.
I'm wearing one right now.
That wasn't going to work. But, still, the concept of it could be, it was being worked on So you could see perfections in it down the line, especially with 900 years into the future.
Right. I just, knowing how transporters work and what it does, there's always been something left behind.
It's yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Because even
That
in
was the
Voyager
thing.
and Deep Space Nine, they had used them and theorized that some individuals had to use them, I believe, in Deep Space Nine. And then in Voyager, I had to look this one up. They used a site-to-site transporter.
Site-to-site transporter.
And then Harry Kim believed that if mobile transporters were brought to the surface of a Class Y planet, enough deuterium to get Voyager all the way to the Alpha Quadrants, but they were all bulky. This is now much smaller and ubiquitous.
Much smaller.
And,
But it has
and it
to
was
be
small enough to be worn, and it was used and brought along with the wearer.
Yeah.
So if you're dematerializing into something, let's say your body goes into that device, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then the
device
device dematerializes
also.
as well. So, and listen, that's cool. I think it's awesome. I don't have a problem with it, but I would definitely like, as we move along, if we were to just quickly explain how it works, because transporters have always been explained.
And it's not
The
just
technology, the advancements, and what they do. It's always been a science. Even when they're trying to solve problems with the transporter or by using the transporter, they explain how it's being used and why it will work or why it will not.
yes. And
It's just one of those things.
it's one of those things. It's basically that's why I'm really excited for actually season 3 is to see the new technology and see where they're going to go with it. But yeah, give us that explanation why you think this works and make it plausible.
Which I can see them doing it. It would be a very easy way. I can see very easy ways to get into it. I mean, you're dealing with an entire crew that's going to be introduced to new technology. It's very easy to have them communicate with
what
people
the
from
heck?
that time.
How the heck does this work? It's kind of like that scene that Burnham had with Book, where Book healed her by using some kind of implants in his body to create a plant, and use the salve from the plant to heal that
Well,
wound.
that's more of a spiritual thing. It seems like he has. Well, I say spiritual, but I'm sure it's science. But
I think it's technology because of like
is it? Because didn't he say
seems-
he was born a certain
was
way
born
to
a certain
connect?
way.
Yeah, with nature.
So I was like going, okay, is this more of a technology or is this more of like a biology? Is he a different type of alien?
I think it's more biological, but we'll see.
But yeah, we'll see. I thought that doing stuff like that, it's okay to do, but you do have to explain it down the line.
Yeah. All right, Dave, we do need to move into final thoughts. How about you get us started?
All right. My final thoughts for this, I am really happy how Discovery Season 3 started up. If you've listened to our shows, I've been really hesitant. I've been kind of nervous going into Discovery Season 3, how everything was going to be coming out. And I will be the first one to say that this episode was the perfect episode to come back to. And I'm not going to go full on board and just blow it and give it the David 100, but I am going to give this a solid 90. Everything was actually nicely, neatly written. Everything was tidy. I really liked what Michelle Paradise was able to do. The only nitpicks, I'm surprised that I'm kind of happy that you had the same nitpick that I did, which was the technology issue. But the way I looked at it after viewing it a second time was, okay, we're 900 years in the future. Please explain some of how the technology works. You have to. Even it doesn't take long. It doesn't take long to explain it. They did it in past seasons of Discovery. They were able to explain how the technology works. So I took off points for that, but overall, this was a fantastic watch for me. I'm really psyched for it. I can't wait for the next episode because I want to see my Discovery crew now. I want to see Saru. I miss my redheaded goddess. That is Tilly.
Oh,
Because I need some Tilly in my life.
we all do. We all need some Tilly. All right, Dave. So I'm also going to give this a 90% on the RMD score. I really thought it was one of the best, I'd say the best Star Trek Discovery premiere to date.
Yeah.
It was loaded with all types of Star Trek feels. The fact that the intrigue and the want of well, I don't know. I'm not sure how to say this, but the intrigue and the sense of wonderment. There we go. Is back within Star Trek. The optimism within the depths of despair, the idea of hope, and that the spirit has been undiminished. Starfleet and the Federation both exist, but they need to find them. Oh, Jesus, I just burped. Starfleet and Federation. I'm at the end of I'm at the end, Dave.
You're at the end.
We've now recorded shows for almost 2.5 hours, and I have no strength. I might die right now.
You might die.
The fact that Starfleet and Federation still exists, it validates Burnham's sacrifice. That's one thing I wanted to make sure came across. The fact that, and not just Burnham, the entire Discovery crew, they made a huge sacrifice going into the future to save all of organic life, and for them to come back to a world where it's just completely destroyed, and it would make you feel like everything was all for naught. So when she says the Federation is more than just ships, it's about the people, and then we find out that these people do exist, they just have been separated from this cataclysmic event, suddenly her sacrifice and the sacrifice of the Discovery crew has been validated, and that it did matter, and that there is still hope.
Yes.
So I think it's a great beginning to a season that I'm really looking forward to. This does bring us to the end of our discussion. I want to thank you, David.
Thank you. Live long and prosper.